Hello, all, and welcome back to Beyond the Northern Wall, your weekly talk show with me, your host, Kayla Malari. I had a whole different way to start this episode, but as most of you know, the vice presidential debate did just end, and if we're talking about nightmares this series, talk about that nightmare. Holy cow. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't anything like the presidential debate, but that took a second. Koki's in here. Hey, Cokes. How you going, Cokes? How you going to everyone? So welcome to a new series of Beyond the Northern Wall, known as, goodness gracious, going to be known as the Nightmare Series. And before I get into the Nightmare Series, there has to be a little bit of context that has to go along with this. So what does it have to do with Beyond the Northern Wall? What does it have to do with the core dance crew in general? Well, as I stated at the very beginning of the series, Beyond the Northern Wall is the vast exploration of anything and everything that has to deal with core. And a big part of it is this dark side that we started to explore at the beginning of the 1/10th season, as you know, and didn't really get to finish exploring. So this October, we kind of get to delve into that a little bit more with this Nightmare series. Now, a little background. Hopefully this doesn't blast your guys' ears, so brace yourselves. Should be very quiet. If you didn't know, we started out the 1/10th season with a new theme. We kind of follow a theme as we go into the seasons, the later we came into core. And when we started the 1/10th, we had just come off of the 109th when we did ATM and we did Boku no Hero Academia for the first time. So we got to play these amazing heroes of our favorite anime. And so when me and Soulmate decided to go into the 1/10th, we got together with the rest of our board and we thought, what's the theme for this year? Well, we played heroes most of the year before, so we're like, let's explore the dark side. So the year before, we had a theme where everyone got to choose who their favorite hero was and we put it on a jacket. At the beginning of the 1/10th, we decided who would your version of a villain be? And that's where the idea of Stained came in. Stained is a concept, the concept of the dark side. And the reason why we went with Stained is because there are layers and there are different avenues that the dark side can take. There's the quintessential darkness is evil. But there's also the very controversial anti-hero. There's also the idea that shadows suggest something darker but don't necessarily mean evil intent. And then there's the idea that darkness doesn't have to be evil at all. It is just a freedom that you get when you're not worried about treading on the light side. For those who know Star Wars, you know that the purple lightsaber shows that you have force touches on both sides of the force, both light and dark, and that you understand that. That's kind of where the idea of Stained came from. So when we started conceptualizing this idea of the Stained video, the black paint represented what we felt was darkness, whether that was something incited from beyond us, as you see with some of the dancers, something that is put onto us, or something that was kind of there all along. Some of the dancers were very symbolic with how they did their Stained video. They chose different ways of how they wanted to represent it. They had ideas. Other dancers came in and were like, well, I don't really know what I can do, so let's talk through it. And as a group, we would talk through, okay, what does Stained mean for you? One of the really significant ones for me were people like Sonali and Rostin and Shellen, who don't put the staining on themselves. It is put on them. That's something very particular to them, where the darkness wasn't something that was necessarily there or something that they gave themselves. It was something that they felt was put onto them from outside forces. There's also people like Urban Little, when she comes in with her Stained, she kind of looks at it a little confused, a little surprised, not so much accepting of it like others. That was very exclusive to my little. Urban's dark side isn't something that's truly malicious, if ever. I don't even know if she really has a dark side. And so that's where that confusion came from. For myself, I know that when it came to what stained meant for me, mine was a little different. We filmed most of this all in one day. Most everyone in a large chunk. There was only a small handful of us that filmed our stained video separate. It was probably me, Bev, Jason, and Jay Dang. So when we filmed it, everyone else was at rehearsal, and we went in a different room with significantly less people. It was just Shell and NJ and Sammy behind the camera for me. And of course, Little and Manager Son were helping. And so when it came time to do my stained moment, I had a very particular idea of where my black paint was going to be. I wanted it to cover one entire arm, completely doused, as if I dipped my entire arm in tar. And I'm looking at it, and I'm intrigued, and I'm confused. And then I pull aside my shirt, and you realize there's been a stain there the whole time. That's something that was very particular that I wanted to show that my darkness has always kind of been a part of me. And then the paint only ever concentrates right here, not over the heart, over the chest, over the base of the throat onto my chest, and then right here at the side of my head. And that was very planned as well. And I say that because it came from something that I've thought of and I had to follow ever since I was a kid. And then as I grew up, it kind of influenced the way that I interpret things on stage, the way I choreograph, the way I watch things. So the reason why the darkness is there and the reason why we're doing the Nightmare series is because I'm going to talk to you guys about some stuff. When I was a kid, I used to sleepwalk. Sometimes the sleepwalking was not walking. There is a story that my sister still tells to this day, where when we were in grade school, when we were older in grade school, around like 3rd grade, and she was in 5th grade, we had our separate rooms, but we would always end up staying over in each other's rooms because me and my sister would play together from the moment we wake up to literally the moment we'd fall asleep. So we'd always just take turns sleeping over in each other's rooms. We were sleeping in my room one night, and according to my sister, I sat up, completely asleep, and started playing video games. So that's probably what we were doing before we fell asleep. Playing video games, completely asleep. She sits up and she realizes I'm very distressed because apparently in my video game sleep, I'm dying. My character's dying. So stressed out, I hand this invisible non-remote to my sister. And I say, you need to play for me. I'm going to die. You need to play for me. I'm going to die. She's confused because I'm asleep. So she mimes taking this invisible controller from me. And I wouldn't know how I would have known that she took it, but I did apparently. And then I laid back to sleep and she's just sitting there holding nothing, kind of confused. Then I sit bolt right, turn to her, eyes still closed, and say, play. She immediately starts pressing visible buttons. And then I am now satisfied and I go to sleep. And she told me that story the next day and we laughed and we've laughed at it for the last 20 years of our lives. Sometimes my sleepwalking used to actually be sleepwalking. When I was a kid, I could never get the buckles of my overalls undone. I had so much trouble undoing the buckles of overalls. And yet my mother insisted to always buy me overalls. Why? It was terrible. Going to the bathroom was stress ball change. I'd just be like crying to myself in the bathroom because I had to pee so bad and couldn't get out of my clothes. Well, that is a good thing because apparently another story that my sister and my parents have told me is that when I was taking a nap in the living room, I got up while I was sleeping and I walked to the kitchen and I started to struggle with my buckles. And they were all just looking at me like, what is she doing? And I couldn't get it off. So I peed in my overalls. Thank God I couldn't get my overalls off because I peed in my overalls and not in the kitchen. But I definitely sleptwalked and peed in my kitchen. And then sometimes the sleepwalking wasn't very good. There is one particular story that my family always told, and their perspective was very different from mine. This story, all that I can remember is being woken up by my mom, and my mom is very upset. And I remember her waking me up, and I'm sleeping on the floor of our living room. But I didn't fall asleep on the floor of our living room. And she's very distraught. I remember looking, and this was like back in the day, but when I'm young, back in the day, when TVs were boxes and had like a backing. Well, we had this big TV that sat in the living room, but it had broken recently. So while we were waiting for it to get repaired or waiting to replace it, we had brought my aunt's other TV, which was a little bit smaller, and we just stacked it on top of that one. So essentially in the living room, there were two TVs on top of each other, but only the top one worked. When I woke up, both TVs were on. And it was seriously poltergeist static. Just two static channels. And I woke up and I asked my mom, I was like, what am I doing down here? And she was like on the verge of tears. And they didn't even really explain to me what happened until the next day. What had happened was my sister was asleep in her room and I was asleep in my room. My sister said that she felt like something was wrong. So she got up and went to my room to check on me. When she went to my room, she found my bed empty and my window wide open and the screen slightly popped out. So she thought immediately I had been kidnapped. Of course. She ran to my parents' room, woke them up, told them Kayla's been kidnapped. So immediately my parents get up. They run downstairs. Our front door is at the bottom of our stairs. The front door was wide open. The door was wide open. The screen door is wide open. Who knows how long it had been open? Wide. As they leave that front living room, they go into the kitchen. All the lights in the kitchen and the back room are all on. The garage door is open. In the garage light is on. The car keys are in the van, and the van is running. In the living room, the lights are on, both TVs are on, and I am sleeping on the floor in front of the TVs. I did that all while sleeping. I literally don't remember any of that. That's a lot. That's a lot of dexterity. It's a lot of dexterity I don't have as a waking person. So I was kind of surprised that I had it as a sleeping person. That was probably the most intense I ever did sleepwalking thing, at least that I can remember, which clearly I don't remember much, or that's as much as my parents ever told me. We know it was me, unless this story is a lot creepier than I think it is and it wasn't me. But that was probably the worst sleepwalking case I had. And then there were other ones, were talking in my sleep, imagining things in my sleep. And then for a good chunk, I didn't sleepwalk. I didn't have any problems. But I didn't know until I got older that I didn't sleep and have dreams as often as I slept and had nightmares. One, and this delves into a little bit of how creepy my sister is. She's a Scorpio, by the way. And if you know Core, you'll know that Brandon and my sister are very much the most in tune to the supernatural on Core. When we were little, I fully believed my sister used to be able to jump into dreams. And it's because when I was in 5th grade, I had a dream where I can't even remember who it was anymore, but I'm pretty sure it was me. I was running and I ran to a place that looked like our front yard. And in the front yard was my sister standing over a sarcophagus. And the sarcophagus was decorated in very elaborate Baroque artwork and sculpture. But the sarcophagus was doused in blood and viscera, like literally dripping off. And she was hosing it down, trying to get all the little bits and stains off of it. And I ran into this scene in this dream nightmare. And I remember looking at my sister and knowing she wasn't supposed to be there. And I said it to her and I said, "What are you doing here?" And she looked at me and said, "I don't know." And I just left and I went on with the dream. The next morning in the kitchen, I told her, I said, "I had the weirdest dream about you. You weren't there originally. And when you showed up, I knew it was wrong." And I said, "You were standing in the front yard and there was this sarcophagus covered in blood." And then my sister told me, she was like, "Yeah, and I was hosing it down, but it just wouldn't come off. And then you asked me what I was doing there." And I looked at her and I said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "I had the same dream." I'm just going to leave that at that. I will say that hasn't happened with me and my sister very often, but it does happen with my sister and other people very often. She very much jumps into people's dreams. That's her old weirdness. Then progressively, as I got older, my nightmares got more vivid and they were always very normal until I woke up, until I realized, that wasn't a dream, that was a nightmare. But this series is going to be dedicated to a series of nightmares that have kind of stuck with me and kind of bothered me for years. And the reason why it's a series is because there are 3 nightmares that look and feel very different from the rest. In my dreamscape, I don't have any absolute coloring. Everything looks like a haze. Everything always looks unfiltered. Like it hasn't been color corrected. Everything is kind of transparent. Nothing's opaque in my dreams, even the good dreams. I had a beautiful dream where I was playing Quidditch and flying a broom was so hard, but it was so elating. And I remember that one, but even then, I couldn't quite see the colors around me. I could feel the flight, but I couldn't see the colors. There are 3 nightmares that have the most vivid coloring that I've ever had. The most saturated, even though some of them were mostly black and white, the black was so dark and the white was so bright that it's like you took the contrast and you turned it up. And there was a boy in every single one of these dreams that aged with me every time I had this dream, this nightmare. The first one is one that I called Dead Daughter. And I remember because it was the most incomplete story. I was having a regular dream, just a regular dream. And then it stopped abruptly. And it's like I woke up in someone else's body. And I was outside in a very, very small town where there was one house separated from the rest. And it looked like a rundown country house, just isolated from the rest of the town. It wasn't night yet. was about twilight. And I was standing there, and I wasn't quite sure what time era I was in. I couldn't say I was in modern times. And I felt like it was from way, way back. But I also didn't feel like it was me. I felt like I was a spectator in someone else's body. And I wasn't alone. There was a few other women and a couple of men, young men and women, with me. And we were all standing in front of this house, facing a large group of other people, much larger than ours. And no one spoke, but the storyline and the situation came to me that there was someone in the house behind me, and it was a girl. And whoever that girl was, the villagers wanted, because they believed she was evil. And me and those other young women and men were standing in their way. And it's because we didn't believe that that woman was evil. But even as I was hearing this in my perspective, I was a little concerned, thinking, I don't know if I'm right. What if the villagers are right? What if this woman in this house, I don't know who she is. I never saw her. What if she is evil? What if she is wrong? It was very confusing. And there was a man at the front of the mob. I knew it was a mob. And he stepped forward and he started talking. And as his mouth moved, I couldn't hear a word he was saying. And it's like it didn't matter what words he said. Because what struck me was that the orange of the sky was orange. The grass was green. It was very green. I could see the color on the house. I could see the men and women next to me. And as they're playing out this scene, and I don't know what it is, I remember just looking around, kind of being this other entity in it, really confused because I didn't believe I was supposed to be there. At the front of the crowd, a little to the left, was a woman, and she was holding the hand of a child. And I remember thinking, why the heck is there a child here? This is like a mob. And he was just a little boy, a little black-haired boy. Honestly, probably had this haircut. He was just there. He was probably like a kindergartner, just standing there. He was the only kid in this whole crowd, and that was it. And then my person stepped forward and started talking to the man. And that incited an argument that I didn't understand. And then the crowd started to get riled up. And when the crowd started to get riled up, we started to get nervous. And then I remember the man grabbed me, and then I felt not a sharp pain, a dull ache in my stomach. And I pushed him away from me, and I looked down, and I realized there was like a pitchfork sticking out of me. I had been stabbed, and the blood was red, very, very red. And I remember I didn't fall, I just laid down because I couldn't understand what was going on. It wasn't like a shock. It wasn't like a searing, fiery piercingness. No, it's just like I had a stomach ache, and I looked down and I was like, oh no, I've just been stabbed. So I laid down there, and then chaos exploded. The men and women on my side are now screaming, and the mob is charging, and there's things on fire, and there's all this screaming. And I pulled the pitchfork out and I laid it down, and then the man got on top of me and he said, daughter, daughter. And I realized, like, this man was this girl's father. And I thought that was so bizarre and weird. And then he yelled into my face and said, time to touch the dead daughter. It's not a good phrase, but then his hands were on my throat and I couldn't breathe. I'd never been so scared. And I remember waking up, and at the time, I was dating someone else, and the person I was with had to stop me and shake me awake because I wasn't breathing in my sleep. And as I was not breathing in my sleep, I was starting to choke myself. So I woke up to myself choking. And he was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was crying, and I could feel it on my throat, and I could feel it on my stomach. I could feel the pressure of his knees where they were squeezing my sides because he was really trying to choke the life out of me. And for some reason, I knew for a fact he was this girl's father, whoever this girl was. And that scared me. Scared me to all get out. At the time, that was the first one. The very, very first of the 3 stories. The second one was a little bit more harrowing. I think if soulmates here in the chat, this was the one where she was living with me. And I think this is the one where it was her, Matt, and my friend who was staying over, Anthony, had to hold me down. I remember waking up to the 3 of them holding me down because I was thrashing so hard. I'm debating whether I should start it on this one or not. Yeah, I'll start it. The second one was called The 3 Women. And the 3 women I actually wrote out to create a short story anthology, and I stopped writing it out because I scared myself. Maybe I should read it. Let me see if I can find it. The thing with these stories is that when I woke up from that first one, sorry, I'm remembering that dream. I woke up from that first one and I didn't forget it. You know when you wake up, I saw in a book once, or not in a book, in a movie, where someone said, you don't realize a dream is a dream until after you wake up. And that trying to remember your dream is like trying to hold water in your hands. The more you try to hold on to it, the more it slips away. I remember that from a movie. And most dreams were like that. That first one wasn't. It was prominent, and it frightened me because I could hear his voice in my head. The second one, The 3 Women, started, and everything was in that high contrast black and white. I'm going to try to remember this as accurately as possible. Everything was in black and white, and it was Victorian times. The dream was Victorian times. And I remember it ran like a movie in my head. I legit remember having this nightmare and thinking I'm watching a movie. It started in a cityscape, and I'm looking down on the city. It's all deep blacks, bright whites, and every shade of gray in between. And I thought it was snowing. It looked like it was snowing. It wasn't snowing. As the scene went on, I realized that was ash. Something had been burning. Something vast has been burning and was raining ash down. And there was this woman who was me. This time it was me. But during this nightmare, I was either in the person that was me or I was watching myself be. I was standing there with the boy. The boy was with me. And this dream, in comparison to Dead Daughter, was about a year and a half later. The boy was about a year and a half older. He wasn't a young kindergartner anymore. He was like first, second grade. He was a very young boy. He wore shorts, Just had a white shirt. His hair was dark. He was very polite and kind. And I remember looking at this boy, and once again, the story didn't have to be told to me. It was just known to me that there was something that this boy knew. And whatever he knew was dangerous. And someone was after him for what he knew. And in order to save him, he had to get 3 parts of a secret from 3 different women in the right order. And the secret was deadly. It's very complicated. So he had to find these 3 women, and he had to find them in the right order. And once he got the secret from them, these women would die so that no one else could know the secret. If he got the secret out of order, then the women would die, and he wouldn't get the secret, and he would die. And if he didn't find all the pieces to the secret, what was after him would find him, take whatever he knew, and I think he would be tortured and killed. I just remember looking at this boy and knowing I had to help him find these 3 women. Now, in my nightmares, as you guys know, in dreams and nightmares, time is relative. Days can pass, hours pass, and they feel like seconds or minutes. In these nightmares, the hours were long. So long. I spent days in this nightmare. I spent mornings and nights in this nightmare. I was with this boy for weeks. It took us days to go find the first woman. And when we did, we found her in a different city, in a different town. We adventured for so long. And I saw her at the end of an alley, and I told the boy, there's the first woman. You have to go to her, and you have to get the secret. So he nodded, and I watched him run to this woman, and she leaned down. She had crazy, wily hair. She looked gaunt, sickly. She didn't look well. She leaned over and she whispered her secret in his ear. The minute the secret was done, a noose came down, wrapped around her neck, yanked her up. Her eyes and her mouth were sewed shut in front of us. She yelled as whatever was piercing through her skin sewed it shut, so that even in death, she couldn't tell the secret. And she was left there in the alley after she had given it up. It was horrifying. The boy was unfazed. I looked at this woman. I was speechless. One, because her death had been so brutal. Her death had been so violent, and I hadn't expected it. But 2, because in that moment, as I saw her hung, I knew I was the 3rd woman. I hadn't known that in the beginning, but I knew it in that moment. So as we journeyed to find the 2nd woman, I fretted to myself, what am I going to do? Am I not going to give him my secret and forsake him to whatever is coming after him? Or am I going to willingly give him my secret, knowing that that was going to happen to me at the end? We spent weeks finding the 2nd woman. She was much harder to find. We found her inside. It looked like a church, but it wasn't a church. I knew it wasn't a church. It didn't feel like it. And the same thing happened. He ran up to the woman. She whispered her secret, and immediately she was hung, and her lips were sewn shut, and her eyes were sewn closed. As we ventured together after that 2nd woman, I pretended to look for the 3rd, knowing it was me. I knew I had some time, but I didn't have a lot. We traveled in my mind all over the world looking for this third woman. And I'm just pretending as we're traveling. And as we're traveling, the boy started to look at me a little longer each time. And I knew, he knew I was the third woman. And with every day we spent together, I could feel whatever it was that was after him get closer and closer. And I knew I was running out of time. It came down to we're walking along a street, and it was snowing, not snowing again. We were back to the ash raining down, this bright white ash against all the dark black shadows. And we're walking, and I feel it. Whatever that thing is coming for the boy. And he turns and he grabs me, and he doesn't beg me with his words. He begs me with his face. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't ask. He just waits. And I'm staring at him thinking, if I tell you, I will die. If I don't tell you, you will die. Then of course I make the decision. I'm going to tell him the secret. So I lean down and I whisper the secret in his ear. And after I said the secret, the little boy turned to me and he said, I made you the third woman. Then the noose slipped down and it pulled right at my throat. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed before. I felt a needle through my lips and the thread slide through every single wound it made as my lips were sewn shut. My eyes were closed. I didn't want darkness to come. I knew if the darkness came, it would be endless. And I screamed because I could feel every single thing. And I woke up to Matt on one arm, Sonali on the other, and my friend A on the other, trying to hold me down on the bed because I am thrashing so hard. And I realized I wasn't thrashing because I was scared. I was thrashing because I was being hung. I could feel it. When I finally calmed down, I knew whoever that third woman was, whatever the me that was the third woman, was dead. That one stuck for a very, very long time because of what that boy said at the very end, that he made me the third woman. And I thought I was supposed to protect that little boy. And I realized that little boy wasn't good. I think that little boy was the thing that was tailing us. And I wasn't ever certain until the third dream. The third one came a couple of years later, a long, long time later. I had forgotten about this little boy, completely forgot about him. Until I woke up in my nightmare and I was in a room that was all white. A white room. And in the middle of the white room was a white table, a huge white table. It was practically a stage, what it was. And I felt that I was deep, deep underground. The room had a vaulted ceiling, but I knew that we were so far down, far, far down. And I say we because on the other side of the room was a woman, very young, very pretty woman, and she was holding a baby. And I remember getting up and asking her, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I thought it was so real. And she didn't know what she was doing there either. She just kept saying, He put us down here. He put us down here. And I thought, what do you mean he put us down there? And she just kept saying that. It's like, he's putting us down here. It's like a punishment. He's putting us down here. We spent the first couple hours just loitering around the room. I remember sitting and leaning against the stage. She ended up going up on the stage. She swaddled her baby and put him in the corner. And he just slept quietly. We didn't really speak. We were just waiting. Then as I was walking along the walls of the room, behind me I hear her say, "Why are you here?" And I turn around, and in the middle of the stage is that same little boy. He's older now. He's probably about 12, 13 years old. He's still wearing his shorts. Still has his black hair. But he's a little taller, a little leaner, a little bit more mature in the face. And he's just standing there with his hands in his pockets, just looking at us. And I know him. So I climb up onto the stage and I look him in the face, and I remember him from the last stream from years before. And I remember talking to him, asking, "Why did you do that to me? Why did you do that to me?" He's not answering. The little boy never spoke to me, never said an actual word. He just stared at me. And I remember asking him, "What are you?" Without saying a word, he answered and said, "You already know what I am." And the woman next to me said, "What is a demon doing here?" Chill up my spine, and I pushed back from the little boy. And then once again, the story came without anyone saying anything. The boy said that we were down here and he would possess one of us. And after he possessed one of us, he would stay there. He would use that person to kill the other. And then he would be free of the white room. We both, me and the woman, said no, we would not let this happen. I had never hated someone more than this little boy. I had trusted him. I had tried to protect him. And I was so angry at him. And I remember just being in front of his face and saying, "You can't do this. You can't do this to me. You can't do this to her." And he just stared. He never smiled. He was never happy about it. He just stared. And then the woman started wailing next to me. It scared me. And I turned, and she's looking at her baby. And her baby's just lying there, sleeping. And she is on her knees next to her baby. And she is screaming. There are tears streaming down her face. And she is screaming, "No, no, no." And I didn't understand until I looked at the boy. And the boy was looking at the baby too. And then the boy disappeared. And I looked at the woman and I was like, "Where did he go?" And she said, "My baby loves me so much. He gave himself to save us both." And I didn't quite understand in the beginning. And she said, "My baby gave up his soul to the demon." This was disgusting. We watched the baby get dragged to the middle of the stage. An invisible something grabs the baby and drags it to the middle stage. We are thrown off the stage, and the baby rose in the air, and for hours we listened as this poor baby was torn apart from the inside out. We heard the bones breaking. We could hear the baby crying. We could hear flesh tearing. And we kept trying to scramble and get to the stage. I kept trying to climb it because we just wanted it to stop. And it just wouldn't stop. And she was crying, and her cries were giving me anxiety and stress. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get on the stage. And I was crying. I was crying so hard that I stressed myself out. And I remember passing out completely. I woke up hours later, my head was throbbing. My eyes were swollen. I could feel my whole body was sore from fighting whatever it was that wouldn't let me get on the stage to this baby. And I was on the floor of the white room. I was still in the white room. Hours later, I was still in the white room. And I could hear the woman whispering. She's whispering so quietly, please, 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 please. So I get up off the floor. I can still feel the tears on my face. And I look at the stage, and the woman is standing in the middle of the stage. She's wrapped her poor, bloodied baby in her arms. And she's looking up into the empty ceiling. And she's standing on her highest releve. And her feet and her legs, they were so swollen and purple. The veins were popping. The blood had blackened. It looked as if she had been standing there in her releve for years, forcing herself past a point where every vessel was popping. I was trying to get on the stage. I said, you need to sit down. You need to come down here. And she just kept saying, please, please, please. And I was asking her, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she finally answered me, but she never took her eyes off the ceiling. And she said, he can hear me. He can hear me. I just need to get high enough because we're too far down. We're too far down. He can't hear us. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I need him to hear me so he can save my baby's soul. My baby gave his soul to save me. And if he doesn't hear me, my baby is going to be damned for the rest of his life. But if he could just come down here and get us. But we're too far down. We are too far down. And if I can just get high enough, he can hear me. I kept asking her, who are you talking to? And she said, I'm talking about the person who put us here in the first place. I just need God to hear me. I woke up at that moment, and the first thing I did was I jumped out of my bed. I ran to my living room, and I didn't even realize it until my boyfriend at the time said, what are you doing? I was crying, and I was digging in the carpet. Didn't know I was digging. He said, what are you doing? And I said, she's still down there. She's still down there. And she's still down there with her baby. And she just needs to get out. She just needs to get high enough for God to hear her. And I went back to sleep because I was crying because I couldn't get to her. Ooh, that one still makes me sad because I still feel her. She was down there. I knew that if I could just dig deep enough, if I could just go low enough, I could find her and I could help her. But I left her behind. And that was the last time I saw that little boy. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what that means. I don't know if the baby's sacrifice meant the end of him, or if what he predicted actually came true. That if he possessed someone, and if he killed everyone in that room, he would get out. Maybe he's still in that white room with the woman and her baby. Maybe he's still with them. But part of me wonders, did he come back with me? I really hope not. Those were my 3 nightmares. The only 3 that looked the same. The only 3 that stood out. To this day, I still think of them. I don't dream of them. I've never dreamt of them again. Never had dreams like those again. Never had nightmares like those again. But they're still there. And I still kind of wonder, why? And that is the Nightmare series. That is the beginning of it. We have all of October to explore the rest of your nightmares, the rest of my nightmares. But I think I'm going to leave it at that, at the White Room for now. So thank you guys for venturing through those stories again. I actually was going to try and tell those stories in the dark. And I started to, and then I decided I'm too scared because that little boy is still there. I see his face. I can't see his eyes. I couldn't tell you what his eyes look like. They weren't black. And that's what was creepy. They weren't black and they weren't red. I can't tell you what his eyes look like. That little boy. With that is the end of... Oh, that was weird. Ooh. With that is the end of episode 12. We will explore the rest of the Nightmare series for the rest of October, just in time for Halloween month. Don't forget that on Sundays, we do have Koki versus Vegetables. He's over here, not over here. Koki versus Vegetables is live on Sundays at 6:30 p.m. Watch Koki become actually a very adept chef. He's always been a good cook. He's just been kicking it up a notch every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. So make sure you tune in for that. And make sure you subscribe and check all of our social media this week, because we will actually be announcing an upcoming performance of the Core Dance Crew, an upcoming virtual live COVID safe performance. Brand new material, brand new set for a brand new year. So look out for that. We'll be announcing that very, very, very soon. With that, I hope you guys have a lovely evening. Thank you for venturing into my horrible nightmares with me. And we will do more of that next week, same time, same place, right here live on the Core Dance Crew's YouTube channel at 8 p.m. With that, Sotomato on 3. 1, 2, 3. Sotomato.